This is not the video I wanted to make today.
Illustrations by me.
So I set out to make a calm, relaxing, just chill video. Let me just paint and talk to you about some things. You're gonna have to wait for the next video on that one. This one, I asked Golden Maple, I said, hey, those quills were great. I love the quills. I absolutely loved them. I thought they were great. So I said, can you send me your regular watercolor brushes? I'd like to try them. We're not doing a giveaway here. This is just me wanting to try some brushes. I was going to report them to you. So I started going through them, and I used several of the brushes. I used the 12 and the 10 round, which to me, their sizes are a little bit bigger, or they label them bigger than what I think they are. But every company is different. That's not a fault of theirs. Don't take that as a fault. Like their 10, I would say that might be a number 8. I don't know. It could be a 10. Maybe it's an in-between. But it's definitely the 12, I would say, is like the 10. But it's just me. Anyway, I used the flat, a number 6 flat. And I used this, which I love, these dagger brushes. Absolutely love dagger brushes. My favorite, or sword brushes, or whatever you want to call them. People have different ways of calling them. I don't know. Whatever they are. I like them a lot. And I said, I'm going to use these and just see roughly what it does. It was a little, something happened. I said, wait a minute. Maybe it's just me. Let me get some of my other brushes that I've always used and see how they go. So I grabbed my Da Vinci Cosmotop brushes. I had like a flat, I have other ones, and I did grab a variety of different brushes. Flats, rounds, dagger or sword brush, grab one of them as well. But I grabbed the Da Vinci, the Princeton Aqua Elite, the Simply Simmons, because I've had them for a long time, and probably one of my oldest ones is a Grumbacher. I have a Grumbacher round. I love that brush. It doesn't come to a really sharp point at all, but I just love that brush. It's a great brush. So I said, let me take some brushes that I know I love, compare it to them, and see if it's doing this same thing. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong. I haven't maybe used them as much recently. Maybe I even took a water brush and compared some water brush stuff. We're gonna get to some results. Before we get to that, there was some other confusion. It says in the description, sable brushes. As a matter of fact, I'll bring it up on the screen here, probably put it right here and show you. Let me bring it up here so I can see. So in the description, you see right there on the right side, it says sable hairs. And then it says, we are committed to using ethically sourced sable hair from humanely treated sable. We love and respect all animals, making our brush cruelty-free. Everyone that I saw reviewed these. There's like a dozen reviews that I looked at, and they all said sable brushes. But if you click on the bottom, underneath that, they have the little different things you can click to look at some other details. And this is what I saw. You look on the left there, it says high quality horsehair. That's not a sable. A sable is an animal. A horse is a different animal. They're not the same thing. Matter of fact, if you mistakenly tried to ride a sable, you would be you'd be sore. Let's put it that way. They're pretty feisty animals. Anyway, I got in touch with them. I said, what's happening here? And they responded to me very quickly. They answered me. And now, first of all, before I read this, I do not blame anyone for getting English. English is a difficult language. I don't even do English very well. That just tells you exactly what I mean. I explained to you again that this set of brushes has caused you misunderstanding because the person in charge did not edit the product description in time. That was a while ago. It still says that today. I'm sorry, in fact, this set of watercolor brushes is made of horsehair, but there is absolutely no harm to animals. The way we take care is to trim the hair growing on the horse just like people cut their hair. I'm fine with it. Cruelty-free, that's fine. But horsehair is not sable hair. I've never used horsehair brushes in my life. Maybe I did. Maybe those quills were horsehair. I have no idea. I did not ask them that. But I love those quills. I have them. I use them all the time now. And I'm getting better at using them. They kind of act a little bit like these, but they're not. They say that, let me see go back to this section here. I don't know where it is. I've read that it was like, oh, they still have like the great like snappiness about. They're not snappy. They don't. You know when you take a sable brush, you wet it. Even the synthetic sables, you wet it and you shake it off, and it comes to an immediate point. It's just like snaps to a point. These don't do that at all. When you put they're kind of a mix between like a squirrel limpness and something else. I don't know, but it's not the same thing. It's horsehair. I don't know. That's how this acts. And then it says we've created our artist brushes with a strong double crimp furrow, which keeps the bristles intact, no shedding, no flaking, long lasting. I'm not blaming them for this, but you'll see in the video I have several. Well, you don't see me take them out, but there were several times I was painting and there was like a little hair that started to come up that I had to sit there and pull out. Very easy, very simple. They're brand new. When you get brand new brushes, I've almost always seen that in brand new brushes where there's like a hair or two that you have to maybe pull out, or maybe it's split down at the edge a little bit. You got to pop it out. That happens all the time. I'm not faulting them for it. It just says it. I'm just bringing it to your attention. All right, let me go through this now and try and make sense of this with you. I'm going to talk you through the video a little bit and say, this is what I think is happening. I'll check the other brushes and see if it's still happening with them. And then we keep moving on, and then who knows what we're going into. But the next video, we're gonna talk about some things I'm doing in the future. I wanted to do it here, but once I started painting, I'm like, I can't do that. We gotta talk about this. So let's get into it. Okay, now I want to be very fair here to them, and I want to say this, and I mean it. When I used those quill brushes, I absolutely loved them. But if we notice here in the beginning here, and the black brushes are those golden maple, the longer handle black brushes. You'll see a couple of shorter hair, like grayish, like dark gray brushes. Those are the Princeton Aqua Elites. But these in the beginning, the black brushes, they are these golden maple brushes. Now, it could be just a typical thing of horsehair. I've never used horsehair that I'm aware of. I've used like the synthetic sable, like the Taklon and stuff like that, but that's it. I haven't used any other animal hair in place of the sable. But all it does is kind of like push the paint around and the water, and the paint kind of drops off in sections. So it'll either drop off at the very beginning, or the paint will like pool at the end. As you lift the brush, you'll have a big splotch of paint on it, or it'll drop it all in the beginning if you kind of move it around a bit. So it's not my favorite. I would not use these brushes for watercolor. Maybe they'll work for gouache, maybe they'll work for acrylic. That's something I want to try. I will use these for acrylic and try that. But for watercolor, they're just not for me. I don't think I can use them. It didn't matter if it was the rounds or the dagger or the flat brush or whatever. They all act exactly the same, and they would just dump water when you actually lift up the brush. It was kind of strange. It just acted very different from anything else. I don't understand. I've seen a ton of these reviews, and people like, oh, these are the best brushes for beginners, and you should use these, are the greatest. I'm sorry, Golden Maple. I do not like these brushes. They're dumping the water. I just don't like it, and that's something that is not for me. It's not something I would use, and not something I'd use in this way. So what I would say instead, and so start right there, I just switched, and I'm gonna now kick it into time lapse so you see the rest of the painting with the other brushes. But I just switched to that light gray, or that charcoal gray color, and that's a Aqua Elite, and that one worked just fine. It worked like a normal brush. I'd paint with it, and it would just lay the paint down evenly and smoothly. And I know those brushes are more money than the ones that I just was using here, but there's just something was very different. So, and I painted across both sides. That way it wasn't just like, oh, well, that was on the back of a page or something. I didn't do that. I tried to make this as fair as possible, and I painted with all these other brushes on the same page and then the opposite page. And it's not for me. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking for these, I would not necessarily go for these for a beginner brush at all. This is something that, if you know, that's one thing that frustrated me, and I want to be very clear and upfront about that. When I first started watercolor painting, I was using everything the wrong way. I didn't mind using the Cotman watercolor paints because really they still act like watercolor paints, even though they're slightly less pigmented or something like that. They're considered a student grade. Don't worry about that. That's not a big deal. The thing that I really was bothered me and hindered me was that I was not using good brushes and I was not using good paper. Paper was the number one thing. I was using crappy paper and I wasn't getting the effect I wanted. And then it took me a while to figure out, oh, I got to use this kind of watercolor paper. This will work better for me anyway. And so I started getting that, and then I realized, oh, but I switched to brush and all of a sudden it's nicer. I can use it again. I even went through and got the Simply Simmons brush. You'll see the white handle brush that I use later. It's the dagger brush. I've had that for years. It's a $3 brush. It works wonderfully well. It's a synthetic sable. It's a Taklon brush, so it's synthetic sable, and it works wonderful. I even used the water brush, and I put that in the mix, and I said, oh, let's see, maybe, I don't know. I just want to make sure I'm giving this a fair shake, make sure that I'm doing the right thing here, and it's not just me with a different technique that's causing the problem. So, but no, in the end, now, here's what I will say. For my style, it didn't really matter because I can push the paint around and make streaks and do all that stuff, which is what those brushes did. It's strange because usually in watercolor you don't have a lot of streaking, but in this particular, especially with the watercolors that I use, they're not streaking watercolors. That's not what happens here. But for whatever reason, when I used them with the brushes, it streaked a little bit, almost like I was using the Derwent Inktense. When you put that down, it streaks. It's not a flat wash, really. It's very similar to that is what it did to these paints. And that's fine for me because I look for the streaks and the movement and the different things to add the ink marks and to add the ink lines. That's what I do with things. But still, I wish I could have chosen to make the lines where I wanted instead of just having to use them, because when I put it was strange that one of those first ones I put down, that brown, it just kind of pushed the water and then I'd lift up the brush and all the paint would drop out from the brush. So it would go to the end and I'd pick up and it would drop out and it just basically pushed the water. It was strange. It was just acting strange. I can't say it any other way. Like I said, I was originally going to start this video and just do like a paint session and just talk to you about a bunch of stuff that's going on in the future of the channel. And I couldn't really do that because, quite honestly, I needed to address what was happening with these brushes. I was going to show them and, do a little demonstration with them, but they just did not work the way that I wanted them to work. So again, I will continue to use the quill brushes in my work, in my videos, and continue to tell you how good they are because I absolutely love them. But these I will not recommend, and I probably won't use these except when I try them, maybe for gouache or for acrylics. That's what I might use it. The horsehair, it has a very strange consistency to it. It doesn't even work the same as any sable I've ever seen. Sable is usually very snappy. So, and I did describe, so I didn't just fully describe what snappy was in the beginning, in the intro. Yes, when you shake it, it comes to a point, it's like snaps like that, but also on the page it's snappy. Usually when they talk about snappy, they mean on the page. I'm referring to it that way because you can see when it's a good snappy brush, you flick that water off and it does come straight to a point, a perfect point every time, and that's a snappy brush. But snappy kind of refers to what it feels like on the page when you press the bristles against the page and then you pull them off. It kind of reforms instantly. It's kind of a spring that you feel kind of with the brush. That's what they mean by snappy usually. I did not feel that with these. These are very, not as loose as squirrel. They're not. They're not as, if you use a squirrel brush and you put the squirrel brush down on the page, it could almost bend with the page and stay in that form where you lift it up and it's like a crooked brush. Some squirrel brushes are just like that. But this one was not like that. It was not to that extent. But it definitely didn't reform straight to the shape that it was before you hit the page with it. So that's what is usually meant by snappy. I didn't find these snappy at all. but that's not a bad thing. It's just how you have to use them. You keep that in mind. When you look at things and you say, is this good? It's how you use them and how they work for you. I use this Simply Simmons brush. A lot of people hate these brushes. I use it all the time and I absolutely love it. And sometimes you'll see some of those paint brushes and they might dump a little bit of paint at the beginning of the stroke or something. Sometimes that happens, especially because I'm going straight into the water, into the pan, and I'm not, but this is how I would use it. You always see me how I use my paints. This is how I use it. I saw many times I go straight from the water into the pan and onto the page, and that's it. Because this is what I would do if I was sitting on my couch. This is what I would do if I was sitting out in my backyard or if I was sitting in a park. It would go from the water to the, well, actually it would go from the water brush, from the pan directly to the page. That's how I do things. So, and sometimes I do mix, especially with this palette. I love the mixing on this palette, so sometimes I do that. I didn't do it here because that's not how I usually use them. So I just wanted to have a little paint session here, talk about some things. I couldn't do it quite well. I did go back to them and go back to the flat and do a little bit more with the round. And like I said, on both pages, that way I could see how it acts. And it just wasn't for me. Now, I don't know, maybe I've tried always never to be a brush snob. I don't try and be any kind of snob. But because I use, even the paper that I use, which, I have that, I know I keep mentioning it and I never do it. You'll see it eventually, I promise. It's already recorded. I just have to get through a couple other videos before I could show it to you. But it has all my sketchbooks in it. You'll see. I'm not one of those people that is a snob with any kind of products at all. I enjoy all of them. I enjoy, different papers. Some are cotton, some are not cotton. They're just pulp papers. I can work with everything. And as long as I work the way it's meant to be used, I'm fine with it. So now that I know that these brushes work this way, I don't know if I probably won't use them for watercolor though. I'm going to try them with the gouache and acrylic, like I said. But I want to try and use them the best way that they can be used. And then I will show you that. I'm going to show you how I use them, and if I figure out the best way to use it, I'll share that with you. But I wouldn't, if you're just saying, oh, I want a good watercolor brush to start my watercolor journey, I would not recommend these. I would probably recommend something else, like a Taklon brush or something like that. And then when you get a little bit of experience, I would recommend the quills immediately. I think they're beautiful brushes. Not right away. They hold a lot of water. And one of the first things you're trying to do when you first start watercolor is you try and control water. That's your biggest enemy when you first start watercoloring. You have to control the water. Everybody talks about it. So I wouldn't do the quill immediately right away. But in your next set of brushes, I would pick the quills up and just give them a try. They're absolutely wonderful brushes. I love them. I will continue to use them through my work. You'll see them all the time on the channel. Whenever I do use regular brushes. I use a lot of water brushes on this channel because it's just for convenience and some ease of use. But I will go back to some regular brushes and you'll see me use those quills. You'll see me use some of these other ones. It's very important that you figure out what works best for how you work. Now, when you're just starting out, you have no idea how the best way for you to work is. You have no idea that, oh, I needed to use this kind of paper and I needed to use this kind of brush and maybe this kind of paint because the paint I was using was so dull. It wasn't coming off bright on the page. I couldn't see it the way that I wanted to. I couldn't get it as bright as I wanted to. I couldn't get it as concentrated as I wanted to. And so that could be a frustration point for you as well. You have to make sure that you're getting what you want. If you're looking at someone else paint, and you're saying, how come I can't get that result? It's probably it's not always skill. A lot of times it's skill, but a lot of times it's you haven't practiced enough with those materials. And that's the part of the skill that you're trying to develop. So if you say, oh, that person is, they keep working back and lifting the paint off really well, and they're not having, they're not doing a lot of layers, but they're doing a lot of lifting and they can lift it off pretty easy. I would say most likely you're looking at someone with a pulp paper because pulp paper lifts easier than cotton paper. However, it could also be the paint. Some of the paints lift easier than some of the other paints that are more staining. So You have to really look at what that person is using, what are they doing, how are they doing it, and how can I benefit if I start doing it that way. That's just, and then practice that way a lot of times. And that's if you want to copy someone. That's what I'm saying. If you want to do your own thing, you do your own thing. You figure it out yourself. That's what I ended up doing. I ended up doing my own thing and saying, you know what? I'm not getting the results I wanted from anyone, because no one ever said that. No one ever said, oh, you should probably be using these things if you want to get this result, because that's what I'm using. Nobody ever really made a big deal about it, so I had no idea. So I said, you know what, screw everybody. I'm doing my own thing. And I started doing my own thing, and then I figured out on my own from using so many different products that, oh, this is how you do that. I never knew that. This is how this is done. It's working wonderfully. How about that? I had no idea. And so the more practice you have, the better you'll get at figuring out what you like. And that's just the truth of it. I know a lot of people want to know, what should I use for this? What should I use for that? I'm sorry. I can tell you what I use, but you're going to have to use whatever you use. Try it. See if it works for you. I understand money may be tight. You may not have enough money for things. You're like, oh, I really don't want to get that cotton paper, but every time I put layers and layers and layers on my paper, it starts pilling and I don't like it, and I just can't get the result that I want. I can't build up the layers like I want. Well, guess what? You're going to have to go to that cotton paper. You're going to have to go to the 100% cotton that doesn't pill when you put on multiple layers. Now, you also may have to think about how many times are you going back into the same wet wash that, some even cotton papers is what I'm trying to say. You'll do layers on them and they'll start to pill, because they're designed that you can put like 2 or 3 layers on, but then you let it dry completely and then go all back on with another layer. And so you have to let those other layers dry first. Some papers are like that. I know some of the pulp papers are definitely like that. I always talk about the Stillman and Burn paper that I love, that I say don't trust me when I talk about it. That paper is like that. When you have the beta series or the zeta series, you better let that first layer completely dry before you even think about going on with another layer, because it'll instantly start pilling. The zeta will instantly start pilling almost immediately if you start going multiple layers while it's still wet. It's the worst for that. But I have a zeta book that I use all the time, and I love it, because I use it after it dries. I'll put on the second layer. I can put on a third layer after it dries. You just have to know what you're doing. I don't push it too hard, but you can learn how to use the product. And I will tell you, my first 2 professional watercolor books, sketchbooks that I ever got, were Stillman and Burn, the beta and the zeta. And they were frustrating as all hell, because I used to grab stuff, start using it, I'd start going at it and trying to do wet into wet washes and follow these YouTube tutorials and all that. Oh my goodness, it was a disaster. It was just terrible. It would just be the worst experience ever, and I just hated it. Until I realized, oh wait, that's not how this book is supposed to be used. Once I did use the book the way that it was supposed to be used, I put some of my favorite pieces in that Zeta book. Some of my favorite ink drawings with watercolor are in that book, but at least towards the end of it. Towards the end of it, I got the drawings in there, some of my favorite. I absolutely love. And you'll see. I'm going to go through them in that other video that you're never going to see, apparently, because I can never get it out. But that's okay. Don't worry about that. You'll definitely see it. At least I'm going to push for before Christmas. I don't even know when this one's coming out, if it's before Christmas. But it has to be. It has to be before Christmas. So you're going to see this one. If not before Christmas, the other one will be during that Christmas, New Year's break. In between Christmas and New Year's, I'm not taking a break. I don't take breaks. I'm going to put it on there, and we'll do that. We'll show it to you at least at that point, but I'm going to try and get that beforehand. I have a couple more that I have to do, so I want to make sure that I do them and get them out to you. I think the next one's going to be that chat session where I talk about everything that I'm going to be doing with the channel going forward. I will need your help. I will be asking you several questions on, do you think I should do this? Maybe I should do this. How about doing this? I'm going to ask you those questions, so I need your feedback in that video. So please watch that video for me. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you want to see when I start asking those questions, because this channel, we're all in this together. We're all a part of the same thing. And I just want to make sure that what I'm putting out is something that you're signing up for, because when I change gears on you, sometimes that throws people for a loop and they fall off the rails pretty quick. So I just want to make sure what I'm doing is something you want to see. Don't worry about me. I will always make sure that what I'm doing is what I enjoy. Always. But if you tell me, well, I really like to see this instead of this, if it's something I don't like, I'm not doing it anyway. Don't worry, I won't listen to you. But when I ask for your opinion and I say, should I do it like this or like this, I will enjoy it both ways. I'm just trying to see which way you would enjoy it. So that's a part of that. And this, just to point out, going back to this painting here, you ever see those, I might have to put a little graphic up, but you ever see, there was a game years ago called Cooties. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You know, people say, oh, you got cooties and they don't want to touch you. Okay, well, there was a game that my grandmother thought was hysterical to get me as a kid, and I thought it was hysterical to get it as a kid. And it was called Cooties, where you build these little things, these little bugs called cooties. And anyway, this was inspired heavily by that. So I will flip up a little thing. Probably when I'm done with this, I'll flip up a little side picture of what that looked like next to the cootie, and you can see it. Or I may do it during the drawing, because I have a lot of space there on the screen that my hand is not on, so I might just pop it up there. But anyway, I just wanted to point this out. I wanted to make this video and point these out and say, look, I don't want you to be frustrated by something that you shouldn't be. So if you're a beginner, even if you're a seasoned watercolorist and you're used to things working a certain way, I would not call these sable brushes. They are their own thing. They do something different. It's a horsehair brush. That's what it is. And if this is how horsehair acts, then you have to use it based on what it is. I wouldn't use it based on what I would call a sable. And there are plenty of great watercolorists who have used these and tested them, and they say that they're wonderful and great. So you may not want to listen to me at all. You don't have to trust me at all. I have no problem with that. You can say, no, you're wrong. These are the greatest brushes in the world, and that's what I think. And I have no problem with that. That's fine. If you like them, then you use them. I just wouldn't recommend them myself for anybody who's coming to me saying, hey, should I start out with these? Absolutely not. Start out with something different, a Taklon brush, something. The Simply Simmons brushes are really good, and they're really cheap. But I think they're only, I'm not sure. I think you can get them on Amazon, but they're also, I think they're like a Michaels brand or something like that. The Simply Simmons always came out in Michaels. They were like $3 a brush. Very inexpensive, but I absolutely love them. That's what I started out when I really started using some better brushes. I had that Grumbacher and Simply Simmons. And the Grumbacher was I think it was like $6. It wasn't very expensive either. It was either $6 or $7. And that was also in Michaels. I got that. So that might be a Michaels thing too. I have no idea. I think Grumbacher is their own company though. I don't think they're a Michaels offshoot. And Simply Simmons might be as well. And I'll tell you something else that's not an offshoot. These people popping up on the screen right here, they have their own family history, but they're not an offshoot of anybody else's family history. I'll tell you that much. Technically, they paid me to say that. All right, so thumb up the video if you think that you're going to enjoy some good old-fashioned watercolor painting with some good old-fashioned watercolor brushes. And regardless of whether you get these or not, you're going to enjoy painting, because that's really what it's about. I believe there was a show at one point called The Joy of Painting, and that joy has not gone away just because the show has. Let me tell you that much. Alright, if you would like to join our community, go to illustrationsbypete.com. You can come in, you can put your own artwork on the site and promote it. You can find some inspiration in the free reference photos. You can just use them however you want in your artwork. You do not need to credit me. Or you can come into the forums and talk to some people and maybe give some advice and maybe find a little bit of information that helps you. So come check us out. Alright, that's about it for me. I'm going to go. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.